as you can see, we started to modify our Carina taillights. We went ahead and chopped off the reverse lights, and now we are trying to figure out where we're gonna put them and how we're gonna mount them, because it's going to affect whether or not we're going to have to chop this part off here. We're gonna be using this MDF here, and it's going to be the perfect distance from this point here, because we're gonna use this as a basis to mount it off of. And I measured it all out so it will mate up with this edge here perfectly, and we won't have to do much body work at all. That's the main point of this, is to try and make it so we have to put as little amount of Bondo as possible, in contrary to what we did previously. So basically what I found out is that I'm going to have to chop off a bit of this bumped out piece here, and that's going to allow us to put the MDF here. We are going to be bonding the MDF to here, but temporarily we are going to be just using self-tappers to get everything in place. So I didn't film this, but it was really hectic trying to get this thing up here on my own and trying to get it in the exact place that I needed to go. But right now we have this face piece here, and the reasoning for having the two pieces of 3/4 inch MDF here is because these two 3/4 inch or whatever, they actually end up being about 1/2 inch each, which equals exactly 1 inch width, and that's exactly what I needed. So instead of going with 1 inch here, which ends up being about 3/4 inch, we go with the 3/4 inch just to get it exactly the width that I need. And that's because when we close this, we take into account the two pieces of wood stacked on top of each other, plus the 1/8 inch or so of the fiberglass, and then the tiny bit of filler that we need, and that's going to make this made up flush with this trunk piece here. And so all of that was taken into account when we got the wood that we needed, but this is wood glued together. We let it set overnight, and then before I put this up against here, this all has resin on the backside, so we are going to try and encase this piece of wood entirely in resin, so that way there's no way that any of the elements can eventually get to it and mold or whatever else. So we are going to be completely encasing this in resin at one point, but we went ahead and got the entire backside before we put it on here, so that way even under here it's all encased, and even then it'll help seal up the metal that's bare here as well. In addition to having these clamps here, we put in a couple of screws here. Next thing to do is, because I cut out this big piece here, it's actually the only thing supporting this big piece of metal that was here, besides this little strut here. Besides that, this is pretty much kind of floppy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay fiberglass all along the backside here, not only to give this structure again, but also to encase the piece of MDF here and really seal it and bond it to the car. So we're gonna go ahead and fiberglass all this backside. We're gonna fiberglass all around here, and then from there we can start working on the front side fiberglass and the roll pan. In addition to working on this roll pan, we also have to take into account the taillights, because the bezel is going to have to be able to fit inside here, so the MDF is gonna have to be cut a lot larger to allow for the entire bezel to fit in there. And then the fiberglass here is going to act like the factory mounting points of the factory taillights. These usually are put up against a thin piece of sheet metal, and then from there are sandwiched in with this, and that's how they're held in. So obviously we can't have 1 inch of MDF in between there, so what we're going to do is we're going to have the MDF cut out big enough that this entire thing fits in here, and then from there we'll have the fiberglass cut smaller into this exact shape here, and it'll pinch in between the fiberglass, and it'll all be fiberglassed in and nice, and it'll be a very factory fit and finish, and it'll look real nice. So that's kind of the update on that. I know I had a question that was specifically asking when I was doing the taillights if I was going to make the rear end, then cut for the taillights, and it's kind of a loaded question because I kind of have to do everything with each other. I can't really just do one and then cut it out, not very easily, and it wouldn't be the best way to do it or easiest way. So we've got this thing kind of glassed up. I want to wait until we get the front completely done, and then we'll glass it from behind entirely. Once this is dry, we can cut out our big sheet of fiberglass that's going to screw into here temporarily, and then we're going to bring it down into this roll pan, screw it into there, and from there it should create a nice even curve all the way across here while keeping this face here flat. So that means the next thing to do is completely prep this underside here. As you can see, we already have about 80% of this bumper already flat. Obviously, we still have to do a bunch of body work and flattening out. There is the little divots in here, but with the big flat pieces of fiberglass, we are able to do so much and able to get it super flat right away, and that is a huge advantage for doing it the way that I just did it right now. I did go ahead and fiberglass all the way around the bezel just to hold this fiberglass in a little bit better. Down at the bottom, we are going to be drilling holes here and probably in this wood here, just so that we can then fiberglass in those holes and fiberglass this piece of fiberglass there, so that way it's all held together very good, because right now all there is just resin down here holding that in, and a little bit of resin all the way around here, and then the fiberglass in the bezel. So from there, we're going to wait for this to dry, then we're going to drill our holes, fiberglass it to really anchor it down. As for the taillights, what we're going to do after all this dries is we're going to take our frame and we are going to use that as a template and cut this out to the exact shape that it needs to be, which is going to be quite a bit smaller than what we cut this wood at. And that's because obviously the whole assembly has to go inside where the wood is, but then just the frame has to be able to go through here, and it's going to be pinching this fiberglass here, and that is going to be how it mounts. And that's how the factory mounts the taillights on the Carina. I know a lot of you guys are going to be super happy with the way that I'm taking this, and I am so pleased with the way that it's turning out. It is absolutely perfect, and everything is really coming together. This really isn't that difficult to do. It's all just kind of figuring out how I'm going to do it, because obviously this is new to me and probably new to a lot of you guys as well. Anyways, guys, that's where we're going to call it for today's video. I'd say we're about 80% finished with the rear end here, and then it's time to move on to the rear wing and then the silt spoiler. Also, if you guys are interested, we have our Bosozoku style long sleeves, sweatshirts, t-shirts, whatever you want. Check it out, link in the description. Anyways, guys, that's gonna be it for today. Hope you enjoyed, and peace out.